All right, we are live. Hey everyone, this is Kevin the Apptrepreneur, and let's just turn this ever so slightly. Maybe I should move a little to the left or right. I don't know how it looks. I don't know. We're trying out a little bit of a new visual, if you will. Well, it's not really anything that fancy. We're putting the iPhone on a tripod. I know. Magic of YouTube, right? But anyway, yeah, so I decided I would give the tripod a try to just kind of see how it would look, and I decided I would also comment on what is increasingly becoming a very, very controversial story, particularly on my channel. I should really stop talking about this because I seem to just annoy everyone regardless what position I take. But, what the heck? Life can be fun that way, you know? I don't mind having a different opinion. I don't know if you've noticed. I think it's actually quite interesting when people have different opinions than what other people have. So anyway, as you may have been following, or maybe you are not aware, Donald Trump is banned from Facebook. Actually, he's pretty much banned from everywhere, to be honest. He, is definitely banned on Twitter, definitely banned on YouTube, definitely banned on Facebook. And Facebook made waves a few weeks ago when an independent committee was hired to look into the suspension of Donald Trump. Now, what Facebook was hoping the committee would do would come back and say that Facebook made the right decision, and they made the right decision for this, and this. Now, contrary to what the reports were, the ban was upheld, but not because the independent review committee actually decided whether or not he should be reinstated. It was actually upheld because the independent review committee did not make a determination on what to do. And they basically told Mark Zuckerberg, guess what? It's your call. You've got to decide whether or not you're going to leave Trump suspended or not. Hey, Abstract Echo, how you doing? Great to see you, as always. Well, Facebook didn't like that because that puts them in a really awkward position because Facebook wants full autonomy to have freedom to do whatever they want without suffering the consequences of their actions. Now, people who are not aware of what my opinion is, because frankly, I'm kind of neutral on Trump, my opinion is that Facebook should lift the ban on Trump. Not because I like Trump a lot, but because the offenses that Trump committed were on Twitter, not Facebook. Facebook suspended Trump based on what he could do with Facebook and didn't want to be held liable. I don't think that's a good enough reason to ban someone. Now, that said, I think that once Trump is let back on, it will take maybe 5 to 10 minutes for him to get rebanned. So it's not like I think he's going to operate with full autonomy either. I think Facebook should honestly have let the guy back on, let him say something that was violating their terms of service, and then they would legitimately have a reason to ban him, and ban him permanently if they wanted. However, there is a little bit of a problem with that now, and we'll talk about why in a minute. But Facebook has officially given a response to what they're going to do with Donald Trump. And their response is that Donald Trump is going to remain suspended at least until 2023. And 2023 on his potential return to Facebook is pretty significant. There might be something Facebook's thinking about why they're waiting till that day. Let me look at this article first, though, from Politico. And Christina Lima writes, Facebook announced Friday that former President Donald Trump's account will remain suspended for at least 2 years, setting a timetable for his potential return after its oversight board criticized the company's indefinite ban over his posts during the deadly Capitol riot. Here's the other interesting thing about this. Not only did the Independent Review Committee not say that Trump should stay banned, they actually criticized Facebook's decision to ban him in the first place. I found that very interesting. Now, Facebook's Vice President of Global Affairs, Nick Clegg, said in a blog post, quote, Given the gravity of the circumstances that led to Mr. Trump's suspension, we believe his actions constituted a severe violation of our rules, which merit the highest penalty available under the new enforcement protocols. I want to stress again that even though I am not defending what Trump did by any stretch of the imagination, he did not actually break any rules on Facebook. He broke rules on Twitter. That's one of the reasons this is problematic. Both Trump and his critics slammed Facebook's new timetable, which could allow the former president to return to the platform ahead of a potential 2024 White House run. Now, this is probably the key thing. Because, I was reading on Twitter and stuff like people saying, well, why are you even thinking about lifting the ban in 2023? Make it a 4-year thing. Make it so that he can't run again, or he can't use the platform to promote another presidential run, which he is legally allowed to do unless he goes to jail for criminal charges. Not saying that's going to happen, but unless that happens, he's perfectly allowed to rerun for president in 2024. Well, this is why the 2023 timetable is important, because Facebook wants to be seen as Big Brother. They want to say, we are setting these rules. Yeah, you didn't break the rules in our house. We saw you break the rules in someone else's house. And they're our friends. So you know what? You're banned from our house until this date. But if you behave, you can be let back in our club. Personally, I think this is a terrifying abuse of power. But if Facebook want to make a point, why not do a full 4 years? We know that Mark Zuckerberg doesn't want Trump to be in the White House again, and Trump will be very upset with big tech if he won a second term, I'll bet 4 years later after his first term. Well, the reason is because Facebook is also coming under scrutiny for basically being Big Brother. They are coming under scrutiny for having way too much control over not only the American election, but elections in general. And they do not want to be perceived as having too much power, because that is how they get broken up. So Facebook is very cleverly leaving themselves open for 2023. Now, again, if Trump is indicted on some charges and arrested before then, this is probably a moot point. But this is basically Facebook flexing their muscles and saying, guess what? We can dictate how people act. We look at how you act outside of Facebook. Guess what? That is going to affect your ability to act within Facebook. Therefore, Mr. Trump, you are banned. But guess what? You are going to be back in 2023 if you behave. And therefore, we have laid down the law. We have shown that we are the ones in control. Yet at the same time, we cannot be accused of interfering with the election, because guess what? We let you back on in 2023. And that is plenty of time for you to mount your campaign for president in 2024. And he probably will run again in 2024. I'm not telling you how I feel about that. I'm not telling you how you should feel about that. You already know how you feel about that. But he will probably do that. Now then, obviously Trump had a response to this. And forgive me if I shake my head in frustration, because even if I don't think he is the worst thing in the world, he still manages to say some things that just make you shake your head. So anyway, he said, Facebook's ruling is an insult to the record-setting 75 million people, plus many others, who voted for us in the 2020 rigged presidential election. I'm just going to state right now, if Trump runs again, he clearly doesn't think the election is rigged. Because if the election is rigged, why bother rerunning? Anyway, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki, meanwhile, expressed doubt at the notion that Trump could change his posting habits enough to avoid further penalties. She's basically the spokesperson for President Biden. Kind of what Sarah Huckabee Sanders, was that her name? She did the press releases for Trump. Jen does the press releases for Biden. She says, "We learned a lot from President Trump, the former president. over the last couple of years about his behavior and how he uses these platforms. It feels pretty unlikely that the zebra is going to change its stripes over the next 2 years. Now then, the important part, the ban and how Trump can return. Facebook first suspended Trump's account in the wake of his post during his supporters' January 6th siege on the Capitol, saying his further presence on the platform risked inciting more violence. Again, I want to stress, he didn't actually break any of Facebook's rules and terms. He did break Twitter's, though, so, that Twitter ban is definitely logical. The 2-year suspension will be effective from the date it was issued on January 7th, Clegg said. The social media giant said after that period, it would evaluate whether, quote, the risk to public safety has receded, unquote. I'm not going to comment on that one because I think that statement is actually pretty arrogant in and of itself. And then make a call on his possible reinstatement. Facebook said that when the suspension is, quote, eventually lifted, unquote, so they probably know they have to unsuspend him at some point because he, again, didn't actually do anything wrong on the Facebook platform, Trump could face a new set of sanctions if he breaks the social network's rules, again, ranging from 1 month to a potential permanent ban depending on the severity of the offense. And by the way, these rules are there for everyone. The decision comes in response to recommendations that Facebook's oversight board issued last month when it upheld Trump's suspension but criticized the platform for issuing an arbitrary punishment and for holding politicians to different rules than users. And by the way, this is actually true. It's actually true. Politicians get to say a heck of a lot more than what a normal user would say because they are politicians. They are considered public figures, and therefore it's kind of a gray, tricky legal area on whether or not people's rights are being infringed upon when Facebook or Twitter or any of these companies decides they are going to deplatform a public politician. Because even though politicians are not like the everyday men that they were when we started doing this over 100 years ago, the bottom line is that the idea behind the president and our politicians is that they represent the people. Therefore, the people must have access to the politicians. And when Facebook and Twitter comes and they make a decision that they are going to remove access between the public officials and the people, that is a very, very gray legal area. So anyway, now here's the other things. In response to the board's policy recommendations, Facebook announced that politicians' posts will no longer be automatically treated as newsworthy and thus protected from the platform's rules against harassment, hate speech, and more. But even so, their rule-breaking remarks may still be exempt under Facebook's newsworthiness exemption, though the company plans to disclose when the rule is applied going forward. Now, I think Facebook is going to get themselves into a lot more trouble with this than they want to admit, because now Facebook is deciding what posts from the elected officials is newsworthy or not. And that could be tricky because, for example, when President Trump tweets to Kim Jong-un that he's got a missile button too and his is bigger, is that the ramblings of a madman or is that a legitimate threat? And if it is, regardless what it is that newsworthy or not? I mean, sure, if it's the ravings of a madman, then you could suspend him and be done with it. But what if that one comment provokes a reaction from North Korea? For example, like at that point, is the post newsworthy? These are the decisions that Facebook will be making, not elected officials, not the people. And it's going to get really, really sticky. That is a huge, I don't know. Here's a problem with Facebook's rules altogether. They are definitely vague and they are definitely open to interpretation and they are wide. When they say, if you post something that's offensive, you can get suspended. Well, what's offensive? I mean, in 1989, there were tons of people who were offended by The Simpsons. And then there were some people who thought it was one of the greatest shows in the world. Who was right? Or were we going to let Facebook decide that? I know, I'm old. I'm very old. I'm old enough to remember the first year The Simpsons was on the air, and I think I was 4. That goes to show how long that show's been on the air. But anyway, here's the policy questions that arise by this. In accordance with its bylaws, the board also issued recommendations for how Facebook should change or reconsider its policies, including on global leaders and influential users. The company had 30 days to formally respond, which it did Friday. The board's recommendations argued that, quote, the same rules should apply to all users and that any consideration of how newsworthy a global leaders' remarks are should not take priority when urgent action is needed to prevent significant harm. The panel also pushed Facebook to put into motion a slew of follow-up actions, including conducting a comprehensive review of Facebook's potential contribution to the narrative of electoral fraud and the exasperated tensions that accumulated in the violence of the United States on January 6th. A nonprofit advocacy group closely aligned with President Joe Biden on Tuesday called on Facebook to follow through on that commitment, as Political First reported. The board also pressed Facebook to explain its secretive process for imposing strikes and penalties against users, some of the details for which were first unearthed in its rulings. That's another problem with all of this, is that the process is secretive. Who's making this decision? Who's voting on these decisions? These are all private. And whether you like Trump or not, I think you can agree, maybe we need a little bit more clarity. Now, of course, they're going to say that these people are kept secretive because they don't want to be bribed or they don't want to be threatened. I totally understand where they're coming from. But again, there's an accountability issue. When you have a platform that controls over 70% of the world's communication, it's some crazy high number like that, then there needs to be some form of accountability. You can't just let a bunch of 15-year-olds, and I'm being very sarcastic, it's probably not 15-year-olds, but you know, if you're just letting a bunch of college-age kids arbitrarily deciding what posts the president posts is newsworthy or not, and what people get banned or not, I mean, this is how things get really sticky. Now, what's next for Trump? Well, here's the interesting thing. Trump did have a website called From the Office of 42. Now, I know some of my viewers were saying that Trump was now competing with the very social media platforms that he was banned off of, and they took great glee in that. And I told them to temper their expectations a little bit. Donald Trump, as big as he is, as big of a story as he is, as entertaining as he can be, he is not big enough to compete with Facebook. He is not big enough to compete with Twitter. It's kind of an ironic thing, really. Trump made Twitter a powerhouse these last 4 years, and yet he himself is not enough to support a platform. Because here's the thing. Yes, people were going to Twitter to see what Trump was tweeting. Absolutely. They were also going to Twitter to see how other people were responding to Trump's tweets. And when you don't have that dynamic, then you're going to suffer quite a bit. So anyway, here's the bottom line. Facebook has basically given Trump a roadmap back to Facebook in 2023. I don't think Trump is going to change his tweeting or writing styles. I think he's going to be as abrasive as ever. That's what people like about him. That's what people hate about him. So he's going to keep doing it. I do believe he will be back on Facebook on 2023. Now, will he be suspended right away? I don't know. Again, if he decides to run for president, it's going to be very tricky because a potentially legitimate claim could be made that Facebook is trying to mingle with the election. And the last thing Facebook wants is more accusations that they are mingling with the elections. Personally, if I were Facebook, if I were Mark Zuckerberg, I think the most logical thing is to say, you know what, here's the thing. Donald Trump did not violate any rules on Facebook. Therefore, we suspended him out of an abundance of caution. He's not in power anymore, at least he's not the president anymore. And we are going to remove the ban. And if he says something stupid, then we will resuspend him, and it will be permanent this time. guarantee you Trump's ban will be permanent in 10 minutes because the man just cannot help himself. But that said, I would like to know what all of you think about this topic. Do you agree with Facebook's decision? Do you not agree with Facebook's position? I would love to know. Comment below, like, favorite, share, subscribe. And by the way, for anyone who's watching this live, stay tuned because within the next 30 minutes to an hour, I am going to be live streaming again, but it's going to be a much more chill live stream. There's not going to be any particular topic. I am simply going to be editing videos for future use, and I figure, hey, maybe you'll want to hang with me as I edit the videos, because editing the videos, at least these particular videos, not particularly hard, but the processing takes a long time. So, you know, we will see. Anyway, folks, sorry there was no communication. But by the way, what do you think about the background? Would you like to see more videos in the background? I know the sound quality can be improved, though. I'll probably get like a Bluetooth microphone in the near future. But yeah, if you like this background, maybe we'll do this more often. Anyway, take care, everyone.